This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports. You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host Keith Angle on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good evening, everybody. Keith Angle, TGI Sports Talks College Football Huddle. How's everybody doing tonight? It's good to be back. It's been a little while since we chatted in depth. I was on vacation, did a quickie from the cruise ship, which is probably the quality was probably horrendous, so I apologize. Then I missed last week because I had come down with COVID. Maybe I did a show in between. I don't remember. I guess I did a show once I got back because we had Larry Sorensen on. So I guess I was wrong. We did miss the initial college football postings last week, and they've certainly changed in a week, as we're going to dive into tonight. We'll talk all about that, get your feedback, and we'll debate back and forth some of these teams' qualifications, who might still be able to sneak in and look at some different scenarios. It's hard to play Nostradamus here, but it's been an exciting time. So we missed the first week. And as we know, that initial pool had, I believe, Tennessee number one. I don't want to guess. I think Georgia was third. Guess I could probably tell by looking here. Can't I? Oh, let's just look real quick and see if I can tell you. There we go. Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. That was last week's ranking. We all know after last week's history. I kicked myself out of here. Good grief. It's great to be back. I apologize for not being here last week. Little bout with COVID. We're doing much better. I'll probably lose my voice a little bit as we go through tonight, but that'll be fine. So anyway, a lot of histrionics around the league last week, around the conferences, I should say. Clemson gets whacked by Notre Dame, 35-14. Tennessee, in a game that wasn't as close as the final score, 27. What was the final of that game? 27-14, I believe. 27-13. But it wasn't that close. Tennessee just killed themselves all day. I don't want to take anything away from Georgia, but Tennessee just killed themselves all day long, and Georgia had something to do with that. And, of course, the other big game, and I shouldn't say the other big game, the only other big game, but this was the most important. Alabama out. Alabama has no shot at this playoff. LSU beats them. Brian Kelly, God bless him, having a much better season than I thought he would have. They're at number 7 this week. He, in the first overtime, keeps his offense on the field after scoring a touchdown. Alabama scored to go ahead by 7 in overtime. LSU scored, and he keeps his offense out there, goes for 2 to end it. And God bless them, they win. I still find it hard to believe that this 2-loss LSU team's alive, though, for this playoff. We'll debate that a little bit as well. We've talked a little bit on Sunday about some of this. Let's see who's with us right now. Good evening, Alan. Good to have you with us. Alan, by the way, I found out today, congratulations. Alan's going to have his own show on Dan Harris's Let's Talk Sports Network. I do contribute some content there myself. I do a show with Dan on Fridays. And I contribute some Patriot recaps, some Major League Baseball recaps. But congratulations to Alan on his show. And please get over there and check it out when it goes when it gets started. Alan, you send me the information, and we'll give you a little plugs with our audience as well. So congratulations to you. Augustine, how am I? Well, I'm doing much better. I'm about 100% better than I was last year. Well, I keep saying I'm 100% better, but that would mean I was 0 good last week, right? I'm doing much better. I appreciate it. And congratulations to you. Your Oregon Ducks are number 6 with a bullet. They get Washington this week at home. Oregon's been just steamrolling teams since they got steamrolled themselves, scoring just 3 points against Georgia in week 1. They have the what do I want to say? The advantage of that game being a long time ago. Losses later in the season hurt you much more than losses early. And a lot of rumors, by the way, about your head coach, Dan Lanning, potentially being considered for the Auburn job. And he's, of course, denying it. We'll see how that goes. Good to have you here to watch us, Augustine. And again, your Ducks are playing well. 27-13. Thank you for that clarification. Oregon Ducks will beat soon. You don't want them to get beat. I know I'm probably missing something in the translation there. I'm guessing you don't mean they're going to lose. Who else we got here? Alabama on the road again this week. Ole Miss. Alabama. Listen, Alabama's season's done, but they can play smaller. By the way, Ole Miss is hurt as much by Alabama losing last week probably as Alabama, because now an Ole Miss victory this week doesn't do them much good. We'll see how that turns out. Excalibur Iron Force. Good evening. Is this CA under a different name, or is this a new viewer? I think because Excalibur is the name that CA goes by in our professional football pool, also known as our NFL pool. But in any event, good evening. Listen, this poll. I mean, just looking at some of the games from last week, real quick. Let's just recap the top 25 quickly. Go through some of these scores that I just kind of alluded to. Excuse me. And I apologize for the constant clearing of my throat that'll happen tonight. Anyway, let's go. We talked about Notre Dame just absolutely dominating Clemson. Clemson's killed themselves. Look, there's probably scenarios where Clemson's still alive. I'm going to have trouble finding them. Oh, it is CA. I'm having trouble finding them, but look, anything can happen still. There's still a lot of football to be played. Some teams have a tough road, some don't. And we'll go through the conferences. We'll go through these rankings here in a second as well. Just recapping some of these scores. Georgia again, 27-13. Ohio State's being ripped a little bit for struggling against Northwestern, a one-win Northwestern team. But the weather was bad. They found a way to win at the end of the day. I didn't necessarily penalize Georgia early in the year for struggling against Missouri, which looks like not as bad a loss, by the way. Missouri's played pretty well. They gave Kentucky a hard time for 3 quarters this past week. Where else? Michigan rolls again, 52-17 after being behind at halftime. But they're rolling. Michigan's been much more dominant than Ohio State. But that's going to come down to that game. Doesn't really matter. Everybody's getting all up in arms over which team's ranked higher right now. Who cares? That will fix itself, right? They're going to play each other. Won't matter. We talked about that LSU game. Gosh, Brian Kelly showed me something. He showed me something this whole year. Yes, they've got 2 losses, a really bad loss in week 1 to Florida State. And the one thing that Tennessee can hang their hat on, and, Tennessee's going to have a hard time making it back into this playoff. We'll talk about these scenarios here in a bit. And we'll have Mark Mancini join us after the 8 o'clock hour to talk a little more about it as well. I just don't see a 2-loss team getting in But how do you put Tennessee in when Tennessee's unlikely to be able to make the championship game? It's nearly impossible. They're 2 games behind Georgia. Georgia'd have to lose 2 games. Well, I say 2 games because they lost, right? They're a game behind them, but they lost, so they lose the tiebreaker. So going to be very difficult for Tennessee. TCU gets another scare last week. Listen, I'm not sold. I'm going to tell you right now, and we'll talk about these games later. I'll get to your comments here in a little bit. Oh, I see. I'm going to tell you right now, TCU is going into Austin and getting beat this week by Texas. TCU's been playing with fire for weeks. Good football team, don't get me wrong. Love Sonny Dykes, love Duggan, the quarterback. TCU's ripe to go down. And Texas is playing pretty good football. And their offense is really good. And this will be an over bet for me in the cigar box this week. But they win. They win after falling behind or struggling, I should say, for 3 quarters again with Texas Tech. Oregon rolls. They have not scored less than 40 points since that week 1 blowout to Georgia. So Oregon moves up to that 6th spot and still is in position. That's the team to watch out for. Actually, probably USC, Oregon, UCLA. Maybe not UCLA, because they got a bad loss to Oregon. They're still in play. One of them runs the table. They are probably going to get in. But we'll talk about some of those scenarios. USC just ekes out a victory over Cal, 41-35. UCLA rolls over Arizona State, 50-36. Texas, as I mentioned earlier, 34-27 over a good Kansas State team on the road. Texas playing much, much better, 6-3 now. Utah, who hurt themselves with an early loss to Florida, and then a loss to UCLA on the road. They win 45-20 over Arizona. Penn State 45-14 against Indiana. Of course, James Franklin's teams roll over teams that are, no good, even good, but very good teams, doesn't beat them. Michigan State 23-15 over Illinois after a scandalous week. We didn't get a chance to talk about the fight last week, or 2 weeks ago. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that as we go forward. North Carolina with a close win over Virginia, still with a chance to finish with 1 loss and the ACC championship under their belt if they were to continue to roll. Kansas gets back on the winning streak, makes themselves bowl eligible for the first time in forever. 37-16 over the imploding Oklahoma State Cowboys. You know how much I love this team and Mike Gundy. They've done a good job of taking themselves out of not just any kind of major bowl consideration, but the Big 12 championship along with it. Tulane continues to play well. They've moved up in the poll, 27-13. Still, the New Year's Day 6 is on the line for the Power 5 conferences. So big game this week with Central Florida for Tulane, because the highest ranked winner of a conference in that group of 5 gets to play in that New Year's Day 6 bowl activity. Syracuse loses their 2nd in a row. Still a good season for Syracuse and Dino Babers, but a tough loss on the road, 19-9 against Pittsburgh. They really missed their starting quarterback again this week. Wake Forest falling apart, 30-21 now against a rebounding North Carolina State team. And UCF, as I mentioned before, playing a really good football, 35-28 over Memphis last week. So that leaves us with the bowls. And let me get to the. I'll bring the rankings back up here, and I'll get to some of your comments here. This is CA rolling on the YT. It is CA. You got to keep the phone open, so he's double teaming us here tonight. So good to have you with us, CA, as always. Alan actually agrees with the committee this week, with the exception of Clemson being out of the top 10. I do think it was probably, they're in the top 10. You'd have them out of the top 10, I guess. Yes. I don't know if I'd bring UCLA in or not. Clemson was in the top 4. To drop them all the way out, I think, would have been a bit harsh. But again, this will play itself out. Will Clemson have a chance to rebound? It all depends on what happens above them. You know, TCU's got a couple losses potentially ahead of them. It's possible. Oregon could lose. LSU could lose. USC could lose. Alabama and Clemson aren't totally out of this. Alabama is, because they're not going to have a chance to get into the SEC championship game, which is going to kill them. Is there anybody from way outside that can come up? Ole Miss with a victory over Alabama this week. I wouldn't want to be playing Alabama this week. But I'll tell you what, Ole Miss could ride up that outside. But again, without being able to get to the SEC championship game, it's going to be very hard for a one-loss team to get in there without playing in their championship game. We'll talk more about this as we go forward. I just want to catch up on your comments quick, and then we'll back up. I hope the Ducks win more energy. Look at they can't play with much more energy than they have been. They've been playing very well. This is a good test for them. This is a good Washington team. They continue to roll this week. Oregon is set up to be able to sneak in there. Remember, Ohio State and Michigan, somebody's going to lose. TCU still with a good chance to lose. Oregon's not in bad shape. TCU at Texas will decide a lot. I agree. This is a big game. TCU will not get in if they lose this game this week. I guarantee you. I'm a little surprised. I told the guys Sunday that I really thought Tennessee, and I read tons of comments from some of the experts that Tennessee would also, it was kind of split down the middle whether Tennessee would be 4 or TCU. It really didn't matter. I thought Tennessee would fall to 4 because they still do have some really big wins under their belts against Alabama, against LSU, on the road against LSU. I really thought they'd leave Tennessee 4, but as I said to the people who were promoting TCU, doesn't matter. If you're TCU, you just need to win your games. They went out, they're in. The committee cannot cheat an undefeated TCU out of this tournament. They could keep a one-loss team, and I think they lose this week to Texas. I feel, I am getting close to 100%. Thank you for the thoughts there, CA. I feel much, much better. My voice is a little straggly after a long day at work, and I was on in meetings all day, Zoom calls all day, so my voice is a little bit raggedy tonight, but we're doing much, much better. I appreciate your and I appreciate all the thoughts you guys sent me while I was under the weather. Ole Miss can give Bama a game. Listen, there's no reason Ole Miss can't beat Bama. The thing is, do we really see Alabama losing a third game and losing a second, getting a second loss in 3 weeks? I think Ole Miss might have had a better chance if Alabama had beat LSU last week. Alabama's 7-2. People people are talking about this week like the program's dead. Welcome, Carlos, the Mad New Yorker. Excuse me. Your Tennessee Volunteers were atrocious. Georgia's a really good football team. Georgia's defense played tremendous. But if Kirby Smart hadn't taken the air out of the football and his foot off the gas pedal, I'll see what other cliches I can come up with here. This game would have been much worse than 27-13. And Tennessee kept shooting themselves in the foot. I never saw so many procedure penalties in all my life. Not a good look for Tennessee. Not a good look for Josh Heupel. Just not. Tennessee came up small. Sorry. They were never in this game. Hooker didn't play well they couldn't run the football. When they can't run the football, they have trouble getting their passing game going, which a lot of teams do. Bad look. Stetson Bennett did step up and played well. This is what Stetson Bennett does, right? I mean, he's not going to be a big pro prospect, but Stetson Bennett is a very good college quarterback. He makes the plays he needs to make. And Georgia played a workmanlike, put in a workmanlike effort and wins this game. Again, fairly handily, not even as close as the score. I bet Tennessee plus 9, and I thought I had a gimme. Georgia, who came in, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last in the league in sacks, must have sacked Hooker 7 times. Pressured him like every play. They were in the backfield before he could get set up. I'm happy for Stetson Bennett. You know, he's a good kid, a walk-on. I'm not sure why what that question's about, but you can elaborate, Augustine. I did it again, didn't I? UT had several opportunities that fell short. Their youth showed they could not. They were listen. Their youth showed they're a veteran football team. They got a veteran quarterback. They got a 6-year senior. I don't know I'm not going to say this is a young football team. There's always young guys on college football teams, but when your leader is as seasoned a player as Hooker, that's not inexperience. Sorry, came up small in a big moment. Bennett needed a game to prove he's a gamer. he proved he was a gamer last week. Stetson Bennett has nothing to prove. All the doubters last year, he put them to bed last year with a national championship. Have we forgotten? Now, I don't know if that's accurate, Rick. Tennessee's a good football team, and I don't know that they're overrated at all. I think your team is good. Tennessee shot themselves in the foot. But again, you can't dismiss. You know, there's something out there making them underperform, and that's the Georgia defense. Kirby Smart is one tremendous defensive coach. I will tell you that right now. He can recruit. He's made Georgia the beast on an even par with Alabama right now. For them to play this well, and I was one of the big doubters early in the year. You know that. I'm telling you now, this is a much better football team than I thought. Kirby Smart is a really good coach. This defense stepped up and caused Tennessee and Hooker to, to really make mistakes. Again, Tennessee shot themselves in the foot, but I wouldn't call them a pretender. You don't beat Alabama and you don't beat LSU on the road handily if you're not a contender. They're a contender. I mean, every team that loses isn't a pretender. They can't be. Right? I mean, I'm not high on Tennessee. Well, I love Sonny Dykes. I'm just not high on TCU's chances because of the way they've been winning games. There's a double-edged sword, right? You gain lots of confidence and you think you're never out of a game with the way they're winning games, but at some point, you run into a better team with more talent, and you aren't able to come back from that deficit. But I don't think they're a pretender. These teams are all contenders that are left here. Georgia's a contender. Ohio State's a contender. Michigan's a contender. TCU's a contender. Tennessee, still a contender. I just cannot find a path to the Final Four that a lot of experts seem to think is still there. Oregon's a contender. LSU would have been probably without that loss to Florida State or the bad loss at Tennessee at home, beat up that badly, is going to cost LSU. USC is a contender. And that's probably it. Ole Miss somehow, I don't know. Can they get up there? I just don't think they can leapfrog all these teams. I don't think there's enough losses in front of them to get there. But we'll see. So again, don't dismiss your own team's performance, Rick, by saying Tennessee's a pretender. That's a good football team. Bama, 78 penalties, tied for most in the country. That's all you need to know about Alabama. Nick Saban said as much. He's not done a good job this year. Nick Saban, again, greatest football coach, college football coach of all time. You guys can debate me till the cows come home, but it's accurate. He's not done a good job this year. He knows that. The team's talented. He's got a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. Talent all over the field. Will Henderson, who was even touted for a Heisman himself on defense. Not a good showing by Alabama this year. And the coaching, and good for Nick Saban. Nick Saban can look in the mirror and say, I'm at fault. That's the mark of a leader, by the way, and a great coach. Don't look around to point fingers. A few others as well as a few defensive players. Not sure. I'm not sure what that's in regards to, Carlos. 10 TDs. Mordecai. No excuses. Going to look forward and hope UT regroup. Well, we can hope, right? But what do they got in front of them? So they're not going to lose, probably, right? They've got. Let me just take a quick look. They've got Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. They're going to win. They're going to be 11-1. Problem is, Carlos, they got no path to the SEC championship. So let's talk about this a little bit. Where let's just say Ohio State, well, we know Ohio State or Michigan's got to lose. One of them is going to go undefeated and win the Big Ten. The other one's going to have one loss and not have played in the championship game of the Big Ten. So that leaves that team in Tennessee with one loss and no conference championship game appearance. Can either one of those teams, not both of them, one of them can climb back into the top four? Again, I'm going to say Tennessee's got no shot. Game and a half behind, let's just say one because it won the loss column. But having lost to Georgia, that's 2 games. Ole Miss still with a chance to get there. You know, I guess this is a huge game for Ole Miss the more I think about it. They beat Alabama. What's Ole Miss got left? Georgia's not losing the rest of the way out either. They don't have a team they can lose to. I'll tell you what, if Ole Miss were to run the table, they're going to beat Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi State. None of those are the little sisters of the poor, guys. And it's entirely possible that Ole Miss could play their way into the championship game and maybe into this Final Four. Just saying. Huge game for Ole Miss this week. What we got here? SMU 77-63 over Houston. Is that game this weekend? Oregon's had a great season. No doubt about it, Augustin. This team, though, still, they can't afford another stumble, right? And they've still got to play, who they still have to play? Anyway, I was talking about this. Before I get to Oregon, let's finish up with. I just cleared out my.
28 years old, and I don't care. I still hug.
Hold on, I just cleared out my rankings thing here. Now I need my rankings back. So Ole Miss would have to jump 7 teams to get in. Ole Miss going to the SEC championship game and losing to Georgia, let's say. Georgia's in. That's going to leave. Well, Ole Miss, if they do that, they're going to have 2 losses, so they'll be out. They'd have to win the SEC championship to get in. But if Ole Miss does run the table and win the SEC championship, I don't see how they get left out. Impossible. That will put all the other 1-loss teams, that'll trump all of them. So then you're going to have Georgia likely get in with 1 loss, having lost the SEC championship game. You'd have Ohio State or Michigan, whoever wins the Big Ten. You'd have Mississippi State having won the SEC, and then you got 4. Again, if I tell you TCU loses before the Big 12 championship game, they're probably out. That leaves it wide open for Oregon, USC potentially. Maybe even Clemson climbs back in that type of scenario. Very interesting. There's still a lot of football to be played here, guys, and most of these questions will answer themselves over the next few weeks. That did that game go overtime, or was that? It had to be. Was that? It had to be some overtime in that game. Strength of schedule goes to the Big Ten. Well, it depends on who you're talking about. I don't know if that's accurate. That's funny that you're saying that, Carlos, because you always tell me about the SEC teams having to beat each other up. There's no way. And here I am. Now I'm going to defend the SEC. Let's just say we're looking at 1 loss, Ohio State's or Michigan's against other 1-loss teams. I don't think their strength of schedule holds up against Ole Miss's if they've got 1 loss. It certainly doesn't hold up against Georgia. Doesn't hold up against Tennessee. Mississippi State winning the SEC might actually benefit. No, probably wouldn't benefit Tennessee. This committee's going to have a tough call on Tennessee. They finish 11-1 like they should. You're also going to be comparing them with a 1-loss team from Ohio State or Michigan that didn't make their conference tournament or championship. A 1-loss Oregon team that would have to have won the Pac-12. Don't think they win that one. I think Oregon gets in or USC gets in if they win the Pac-12 with 1 loss. Tennessee just put themselves in such a tough spot. I mean, if they'd only lost that, if they'd only been competitive and lost that game by a field goal, SC teams have trap games this week. Missouri isn't the best team. Listen, Missouri's played pretty well, as I said. They nearly beat Georgia. They played really good against a good Kentucky team. I know they played, they've fallen out of the top. Well, they might be at the bottom of it now. Yeah, they're at the bottom, 24. But Kentucky had a couple of tough weeks or tough month. But it's still a good football team. And the Missouri gave them everything they could handle last week. For 3 quarters, anyway. Ole Miss is hosting a broken Bama team. This is a great spot for Ole Miss. And Georgia should be careful. You're right about Georgia being a trap going to Mississippi State. Yes, as I said a second ago, yes, USC does have a shot. I don't think UCLA does. People want to put them in the conversation, but I don't think they have a shot. Again, they run a table. If they're 11-1 with a conference championship under their belt, then possibly they do. But that's what's going to take out west. USC and Oregon certainly have a better shot than UCLA. That is so interesting. I just think it's too bad. This would have been a perfect year to have a 12 team tournament, right? Because it's wide open. Not all these teams we've talked about have a chance to win. Georgia's been really good. Don't get me wrong. Georgia, I think, has shown that they're probably shoulders, not head and shoulders, but shoulders ahead of everybody else. But I still think it's wide open. If you had a 12-team playoff now, who'd be in a 12-team playoff now, by the way? I saw something here. I don't know what I do. Here it is, right here. Who'd be in right now if it was a 12-team bracket? You'd have Georgia, Ohio State, TCU, and Oregon with byes. You'd have Michigan, Tennessee, LSU, USC, Alabama, Clemson, Ole Miss, and Tulane. First round games, Tulane at Michigan, Ole Miss at Tennessee. How good would that game be? Clemson at LSU, another nice game. Alabama and USC. This would be wide open. This would be an exciting 12-team tournament. I mean, the only team I would say could not win out of those 12 teams is probably Tulane, or they'd have the least chance. Every other one of these teams could win a 12-team playoff. It'd be fun. Alas, we do not have it. Pac-12 too, for sure. They're alive. I said that a couple of times. I'm giving your team props, Augustin. I promise you, Oregon has played their way. Listen, Oregon played their way out of the rankings, all the way back near the top. I think the committee would love to see USC in it, and so would the Pac. Well, I don't know about the Pac-12 anymore. They probably got some hard feelings about them leaving. What else we got here? Tennessee going to get that US. Listen, what is that curse? UCF was undefeated. UCF had a better claim to a playoff spot than Tennessee did. I don't know if it's a curse. You mentioned this on your show today. We have a 12-team playoff this year, and we're talking about Tulane. We're talking about Tulane because they're in the tournament, but they're the team with the least. They'd be the team with the least opportunity to win. But again, that's why I'm saying this season is so wide open. There's going to be a lot of years where 12 teams won't matter. You're still going to end up with Alabama and Georgia at the end. Right? And we all knew what's going to come. You can't say any of these games are a gimme if you were to play 12 teams. These 11 teams that I just mentioned would all have a chance at winning a national championship. Always been for 8, breaks down evenly. I'm a 16. I like 16 myself. CA. The 18 was probably never going to work for the Alabamas and the SEC. I'm sorry, the Notre Dames and the SECs. Notre Dame was never going to be on board for an 18 playoff. They were going to stay with 4, or they were going to, because they got 1 in 4 chances to get in, or they were going to go to 6, 12, or 16 because they got 6 chances to get in. But I would have gone with 16 teams, and at the risk of getting sued by that guy who lives in his mother's basement who wrote a book 35 years ago that nobody bought. I like the 16-team alignment where you have 10, all 10 leagues get their conference winner in, and you've got 6 at-large teams. Why not let them all play? I don't really like this buy business either. You should play your way in. I understand they're ranking in the top 6. What else? I mean, guys, I don't know who else has got a shot. So we don't have 12 teams this year, right? So I guess we can probably stop talking about it. Georgia's going to get in unless they fall off the face of the earth and lose 2 games. Ohio State or Michigan or both are in. TCU, I think there's a very good chance TCU doesn't get in if they lose a game. Just because the Big 12 is not that good this year. There's other years that, you could have lost a game in that conference and gotten in. You could have lost the conference championship game and got in. They can't lose a conference championship and get in now. And we can't talk about the 2-loss teams as long as there's undefeated teams. You still got 4 undefeated teams that could stay that way. If TCU loses, we know Michigan or Ohio State will lose. A 2-loss LSU championship team, which I don't think they can beat Georgia at a neutral field. It won't happen. Would come into the conversation with some of these 1-loss teams. You're gonna have some very interesting. I've never been a big fan of teams that don't win their conference getting in above teams that do. So let's just say LSU wins the SEC. That means that they beat Georgia, let's say. Georgia's going to be in. The Big Ten winner would be in. Then you got 2 more spots, so now you got decisions to make. If the Pac-12, winner runs the table, they've got a spot. So now you got the SEC champion, LSU Tigers, with 2 losses. You're going to have a 1-loss Michigan or Ohio State. You're going to have a 1-loss Tennessee. Just, again, bear with me that these things happen. And maybe a 1-loss Clemson team, all vying for that 4th spot. Right? That'd be, in my opinion, that's how it would play out. Let's see. Liberty in the rankings after beating Arkansas on the road last week. Liberty's got a really good team. Hugh Freeze surprised me by signing that big contract extension. Liberty's all in, guys. Should they be in the rankings? Yes. They're 19 in the AP poll, so it's a little surprising, but, again, being an independent doesn't help them. Arkansas is their best win. I mean, what are Liberty's other wins? I know we looked at this a couple of weeks ago. I know they beat BYU. They played Wake Forest tough, but that game doesn't look so good anymore. If they were undefeated, they'd be ranked for sure. That loss to Wake Forest is what keeps them from being ranked. And they got UConn, Virginia Tech, New Mexico. This is a really good team. I've said this for a while. I like what Hugh Freeze has done there. Hugh Freeze now appears to be there for the long haul. This team, this school seems to be all in on this football program, but they need to be in a conference. They aren't even eligible for the New Year's Day 6 opportunity if they were to be ranked ahead of, say, Tulane. If Tulane loses, UCF loses, whatever. Even if they were ranked ahead of those 2 teams, they're not getting a New Year's Day bowl because they're not part of a conference. The independents are not part of that coalition. Well, you got a lot of chances. There's John DeLong. Good evening, John. We've been talking a lot about your teams and your LSU team. Michigan isn't getting in if they lose to Ohio State. But so are you, John? I got to clarify this. I'm okay with that comment. And again, it all depends on what happens. But I would argue Michigan's been better than Ohio State this year. So why would Ohio State not be out if they were to lose to Michigan? I think the Big Ten runner-up's going to have a hard time anyway. They got a better shot if Georgia wins the SEC, the runner-up in the Big Ten. I shouldn't say the runner-up, but the loser of Ohio State, Michigan, has got a better shot of getting in if Georgia wins the SEC championship, because that now eliminates the LSU equation. But they're going to come up against Tennessee. I think you're right. I think either one of these teams loses out to Tennessee when you're comparing them head to head. Maybe for a fourth spot of one-loss teams who didn't get to their championship game. By the way, great game and great coaching job by Brian Kelly last week, John. I know I get on you about the SEC, but I do not think this is the best league in the country. But they're going to have a hard time getting two teams in unless Ole Miss runs a table. Ole Miss runs a table, I think Georgia and Ole Miss can get in. Otherwise, I don't think they get two teams in. What do you got, CA? Yep. Imagine how many we're not mentioning could still play themselves in a 16-team play. Yeah, agreed. A whole bunch of teams that would have a shot. Michigan's out of conference schedule is just flat awful. So's Ohio State's, though. So, and again, now Georgia, by the way, comes way out ahead here because of the Oregon game, right? Nobody's got a better non-conference win than Georgia beating the number 6 team in the country by 40-plus points. Nobody. But who did Tennessee play on their non-conference? Pittsburgh? That ain't no great shakes this year. Ohio State played Notre Dame. Who did Michigan play? I will tell you, you're right. Michigan's out of conference was probably the worst. I don't know what they're thinking about. This is a team that used to play the Notre Dames of the world year in and year out, and they're playing Colorado State and Hawaii and UConn. I guess I'll give you that one, John. But I'm not convinced Michigan's not going to win. I think Michigan's a better team than Ohio State. I will give you that, though. Yeah. There's no way they're keeping them out if they win. If they win out, but again, you probably missed this earlier. I'm saying they lose this week to Texas. I think the roller coaster ride is going to end up in the bottom part this week for TCU. I think they get behind and they can't come back this week. Texas has got a really good offense, and TCU's defense is suspect. Has put them in a hole almost every game. And I don't think they come back this year. But if they go undefeated, they're going to be in. I can't see a scenario where Tennessee, you got to tell, let's just say, John, so for the sake of argument, let's play this out. Georgia stays undefeated and wins the SEC. They beat LSU. Sake of argument. Ohio State beats Michigan, wins the Big Ten. TCU runs the table, wins the Big 12. Oregon runs the table, wins the Pac-12. That's your Final Four right there. You say, and you can tell me what you think about Oregon as well, but you said Tennessee, you wouldn't be for TCU getting in. Who are you going to put in over an undefeated team in the scenario I just gave you? Just assume everybody wins out. I don't think they can. Obviously, we know Ohio State and Michigan can't. But my scenario, LSU's now got 3 losses. They can't get in. USC's got 2. They can't get in at minimum. Alabama's going to have 2. You're not putting a 2-loss Alabama team in over TCU. Clemson would still have 1 if they won out. Who are you putting in to drop Tennessee if it plays out anything similar to what I just said? Yeah, no, I give you that. I have to give you the whole Michigan thing. The non-conference schedule, that's a joke for anybody to play. And I get on SEC schools for not playing people, but that's a joke. Heck, Alabama went to Texas. I don't know. Again, every once in a while, Carlos, we throw things out there. Who's Martin? And Pittsburgh. What? I need some context, buddy. Help me out. TCU is actually the worst out of conference schedule, but they're going to be undefeated if, again, I think they lose. Who'd they play out of conference? Who the hell is Tarleton? Colorado. At least it's a Power 5 school. SMU. In other years, I would have said that's a good out of conference. Yeah, that's not nearly as bad as Michigan's, right? That's for sure. TCU would be double-digit dog against any team currently in the top 3. Again, but that's not the question. I mean, who you put in the scenario I just put up there? Well, it depends. I mean, in the scenario we have this year, you can't. But there are times where you might. If Georgia had 1 loss, let's just say, Tennessee had beaten Georgia. They went to the SEC championship game and played each other again in a really, really good game. Both those teams get in. The Big Ten winner gets in undefeated. And let's just say the Pac-12 was undefeated. I'm going to, in that scenario, an undefeated Big 12 or whoever you want to talk about. There are scenarios where a conference champion undefeated could be out with a runner-up of a really good SEC championship game. 1 loss, both go in undefeated. So there's scenarios that could happen. This year, there's no way. They were on the table. They're in. Oh, UT Martin. Sorry. Well, UT Martin's not a good non-conference game, though. I'm not really surprised. My bet's going to be the over in that game, John. I like Texas this week, and I love the over. Yeah, it's amazing. I've seen more schools this year. I'm like, where the hell are these schools? Y'all realize the playoff committee can put TCU at 5 in the final rankings and say it's because they don't like TCU. I do realize that. They've done it before. They did it to in fact, they did it to TCU. We just talked about this a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I do realize that. But they're not going to do it if they go undefeated. I said coming into this week, now don't get excited if TCU was still 5. Because it wouldn't matter. They control their destiny. Whether you like it or not, John, they do control their own destiny. The committee is not stupid enough to drop an undefeated TCU team. I don't believe the year they got dropped, they were undefeated. I think they had one loss. And Alan, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You can probably no, they won't. Again, not this year. Who are you going to bring in there? If things play out like you already said, Michigan doesn't get in, right? I'm assuming you believe they're going to lose to Ohio State, so Michigan can't be in. So you got Georgia, Ohio State, and who else? The Pac-12 winner if they run the table, but if they have two losses, they can't get in. There's too many scenarios to make a definitive. They'll drop them or they're not. If they lose, John, you're right. And they will lose. So we're probably next week we aren't even having this conversation because they're going to lose. Austin P play Alabama. Alabama. Oh. TCU was undefeated. Is that accurate, John? And I can't remember the year. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I'm not going to say I'm right. Let's take a quick look. Because if I remember right, Baylor and TCU both had really good teams that year. Let's take a quick look. You're probably right. 2014. Well, they must have lost their. No, had one loss, John. I think we're talking about 2014. Oh, sorry. Is when they were in the Mountain West. Is that when they were 13-0? 13-0. Yeah, I guess I can't get to the final AP poll. Yeah, but in 2010 we still had the BCS. I don't think that's the year we're talking about, is it? There was no 14 playoff in 2010. They were still playing the BCS. Worst thing ever to happen, by the way. So in that scenario, they were not dropped out of a 14 playoff. There was another scenario where they had one loss and that's the year they got dropped from 4 to 5. I'm almost positive, John. So you got an undefeated season in there where they didn't get a chance to play for the championship. Yes. Auburn, Cam Newton won the championship that year. They finished second in the AP poll. But that was a BCS where they were picking the two teams to play for the national championship, which was probably the worst scenario we ever had. I'm not going to Tuscaloosa. You couldn't drag me to Alabama with a freaking payday. You say that, and we've had the committees make some stupid decisions. I know. I probably give them too much credit. Yeah, you're right. They had an undefeated season, John, but I don't think that's the year they got dropped from 4 to 5. The year they got dropped from 4 to 5, they had one loss. Michigan has the best fight song. Well, maybe that'll be the tiebreaker. Because you guys are right. I sit here, and I probably give the committee too much credit. They finally did the right thing last year, but they got it handed to them by Oklahoma State. Because you're probably right. Cincinnati would have got dropped from 4 to 5 if Oklahoma State had actually won. Yeah, 2012. That was 2010, actually. I'm looking at it right here, Alan. They were in the Mountain West in 2010. They went 13-0. They moved to the Big 12 in 2012. 2014 is going to be the year that they got dropped out of from 4 to 5. I don't know if this will help me or not. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, because they moved Ohio State up to 4. That's the scenario we're talking about. Yeah, I did too. I thought they'd been in the Big 12 by then too. But again, they finished second in the AP poll that year. With Auburn finished first, having gotten into the BCS championship game that year. The BCS had to be the worst thing the NCAA ever came up with, ever. Computers no likey now. Boise State's the only one left out undefeated one year. No, I think there's been other undefeated teams. I'm sure of it. Boise State had some good football teams, though, for sure. I'd have to look back. We're not going to look back at it right now, but there's probably been some other group of 5 teams that were undefeated that got left out. Boise State likely was one. UCF. There you go. UCF's another one. CA, they got left out here. Scott Frost last year there. Declared themselves the national champions. Don't you remember? 2014, the dropped from 3 to 5 because, right, we talked about this last week. Good call, Alan. Tennessee has the worst fight song. Maybe we should use fight songs as the tiebreakers. Boise State was way back in 2007. You should have flashbacks from that game. Isn't that the game with the Statue of Liberty play and the kid to propose to his girlfriend? I'm not sure what that's about. Thank you, CA. The kid proposed to his girlfriend at the end of the game, the cheerleader. That Boise State Oklahoma game in the Fiesta Bowl, if I'm correct, Alan, about your worst nightmare. That's not it. Where is that? There it is, Boise State flashbacks. That was one great college football game. I will say that. Diane Chambers would approve the fight song tiebreakers. I love it. Anytime we get a Cheers reference in, John, you're the winner tonight. You're the winner tonight. We get a Cheers reference. John wins the prize for the evening. The next year was Pat White in West Virginia. Yeah. God, how overrated was that team? That you talk about overrated teams and pretenders. West Virginia was one of those. Through everything they did, that was a lot of fun, and that was Peterson the coach at about Boise State, I think, at that point. It's fortunate I knew what you were talking about. God, what do we got? Listen, we've had some other stories going on here, guys. We can keep talking about this forever too. There are some other stories around college football. Herschel Walker's in a runoff in Georgia. We won't get into that topic. Coastal Carolina's McCall out for the regular season now with a shoulder injury, I believe. And Auburn, obviously, since we talked last, I think fired Harsin. The FSU coach, Scott, got fired. And John Gruden is rumored to be very interested in the South Florida job. Very interesting to see that's the case there. Auburn, the rumors are Dan Lanning from Oregon could be one and done there. Sorry about that, Augustin. He's denying it, as every coach will do. But it remains to be seen if he's going to stay in the Great Northwest or want to get back into the SEC, where he cut his teeth. So it'd be very interesting to see. Jeff Saturday for president. We won't get into the NFL, but the Colts might have trouble winning in the SEC. But listen, that kid is pretty good. I love Coastal Carolina. I love the way that they play football. I love that offense. This kid is the real deal. I think McCall's the real deal. They're a lot of fun to watch, and I hope to see them more and keep this program going. In the same vein as I talked about Liberty, I hope they can keep this program on the upswing as well. Guarantee that TCU will lose by more than 3 or more scores if they made the playoffs. Jen, you are really all over TCU. What does Diane Chambers say about that pick? You may be right, because I've talked about this. And again, I really like Sonny Dykes a lot. But I've said TCU is just ripe for the picking. They're not going to be, look at, as I said, there's 2 ways of thinking about this. The way they've come back, you build confidence that you're never out of a football game, but you're going to run into somebody really good like a Georgia and you fall down by 3 scores. To your point, they're not going to come back. John's a little worked up about TCU tonight, but he gets a pass because of the Cheers reference. So here's to you, John. I want to go someplace where everybody knows my name. I'll tell you that right now. My opinion? Well, it's all my opinions. I'm not sure what we're talking about. Augustine, throw me the question. Gruden taking Kiffin's steps to success. Well, listen, Lane Kiffin took a step backwards, right? To me, Lane Kiffin being the offensive coordinator at Alabama and taking a Florida Atlantic job, or Florida Atlantic job, was a leap of faith, man, that he'd be able to get back to the big time from Florida Atlantic. John Gruden, I don't know. John Gruden wants to rebuild his reputation. I still think John Gruden will be in the NFL if he wanted to be. John Gruden's going to be, you're going to find out John Gruden, when all the tapes come out in the correct context, John Gruden's going to be looked at a little bit differently. I don't want to get into the NFL stuff. But listen, South Florida, how that would be a great boost for that football conference. Diane Chambers doesn't like the. So CA has found a way to win favor with me. Just keep referring to Cheers. Your elitist card is shown. That we know for a fact, Alan, that is not going to dissuade John, because he wears that elitist card with pride, right? So, oh God. So anyway, let me get through a couple of these more comments. We'll bring Mark Mancini in to talk a little bit about some of these. I don't know that he's going to get a Power 5 job right out of the gate. He's going to have to take, as you said, the Lane Kiffin route and rebuild his reputation probably. Lane Kiffin wanted a party. You know, you are so, John, come on. Why do you guys got to get on Lane Kiffin the way he has? Lane Kiffin went to Florida Atlantic, turned that team into a really good team, rebuilt his own career, and all he does is get, ridiculed for it. And stop harassing Deion Sanders. As I said, John DeLon has never once hit his SEC elitist card. So I got to give you credit for that, John. You are who you are, and you're proud of it. So speaking of proud of it, There's Mark Mancini from Mancini Media. How are you, Mark?
Well, I got a birthday coming up on Monday, baby. 61. I feel like I'm 35, and I'm on the best show that's sweeping the country right now. Move over. Pardon the interruption, baby. Look at the getup you got going.
Oh, man, I'll tell you. Pardon the interruption's got nothing on me. I was out. Well, they get somebody to fill in for them when they're sick, though, you know.
I can't wait to roll the dice with this Kyrie Irving come Sunday and all that crap, man.
Oh my God! I saw this hilarious thing. You know, again, I know we got a college football show, but I'll talk about this Sunday because I saw the funniest thing. I always get on Kyrie Irving and his flat Earth nonsense, and I saw this thing about it. It was a meme on Facebook about the flat Earth surfing contest, and it's all these guys going off the side of the Earth. It's hilarious. I don't know why I thought that was funny. But.
Well, I'm the most hated guy in Los Angeles. I could be the most hated guy in Brooklyn because I don't care for Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant. They're not in my top 50 of all time.
Well, they're at the top 50 college football players. We know that. Yeah. Mark, let's start where we got to start. The college football playoff poll. I don't see how they could have got this wrong. I mean, I thought Tennessee might stay 4, but it wouldn't have mattered. If TCU wins out, they'd be in, which I think TCU loses this week to Texas, by the way, as we've been talking about. Do you think the poll's right now, and who do you see that has a chance to come from behind? I have a big sleeper that I talked about earlier, but what are your thoughts on this poll and who's still got a shot?
You know, I don't waver away from my opinions. I'll throw them out there and I'll sink or swim with them. And I said before the year it was going to be Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, and USC. I'm going to still hold out on that. And you know what? The surprise here is TCU. A lot of people aren't giving them credit. They've taken out 500 teams here. So, I mean, you got to give props where props is due. I never really cared for Tennessee because I thought Pitt should have beat them. You know, and maybe they could have came up, but in Clemson has just been, you know, I don't know where they came from. I've never been an Ohio State guy, and I'll tell you that'll be decided when Michigan finally goes in there and knocks them on their rear end. Well,
one of them, I think, whoever loses, I think, is going to have a hard time making the Final Four.
But Keith, the problem I have with this committee, it's opinion driven. That's all it is when you're dealing with 4 teams. I've always said get 12 where these opinions can't really matter. You got to play the thing out where maybe a team that's coming in hot at 10 can knock off somebody at number 2. I really think Alabama's still a good team if they can shore up that defense. I know they have 2 losses. LSU's there. But why is UCLA dropping and they've only lost 1 game and they're sitting at number 12?
Well, they got whacked by Oregon. I mean, who are you going to put them ahead of, though? I mean, where are you going to move UCLA ahead of? Clemson, Alabama, maybe Alabama.
Well, Oregon got whacked their first game of the year, or you know how Oregon is when they get out of conference, they really seem to struggle. But I'll roll the dice with UCLA and USC better than an Oregon or a Washington.
They had Oregon's got the benefit of that game being so far in the rearview mirror. That's the thing they got going for them. UCLA and USC have lost more recently, and that's why they're where they are. And plus, you know, Oregon whacks, as I said, UCLA. Oregon's going to be one of the great stories. If they start the year, where were they? Like 11th, I think, right? They fell out of the top 25 after that loss and have battled their way all the way back. If they win out, they're going to be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, but what are you going to get with Oregon in a Final Four? Really, I mean, we've seen Oregon get waxed by Ohio State years back in this. I mean, what are we going to get with Oregon? We know they can run roughshod in the Pac-12 when they haven't been tested and they're beating up on these Colorados and everything. But what are we really going to get with Oregon in a Final Four matchup?
Right now, they're playing as good as anybody in the country. They've scored 40 points every single game since that first game, and they've beaten teams by about an average of 3 touchdowns.
You don't think an LSU or an Alabama or or a USC can handle these guys? And Oregon's sitting ahead of them.
Yeah, I'm not saying they couldn't. LSU's not getting it. You can't put a 2-loss LSU team in the Final Four. You just can't. You just can't.
I'll tell you one thing. I don't care for that coach, but man, that was one of the best football games. I haven't seen a football game like that since Texas and USC. Making a gutsy call like that, Brian Kelly, I'll tell you, he got my respect for that game.
Yeah, I was watching that and I said the same thing. What a gutsy call. And then I started thinking maybe he was having flashbacks to that Florida State game and where the kid missed the extra point and he lost. So, I mean, if they had that back, now LSU would be a contender with one loss if they had made that extra point. Well, they would have had to win in overtime. But I think LSU loses the litmus test if Tennessee's would have an advantage over LSU because they waxed them at home.
Right.
You
know what? Ohio State, this is an interesting thing. And a lot of people don't want to give Northwestern credit. Northwestern played with them pretty tough. I mean, wind or no wind and rain and all that stuff. I think Ohio State, if you're looking at this right now, they've been exposed in some areas here. Their running game doesn't show me enough, to a certain extent.
John DeLon says if LSU wins the SEC, they're in. They're not going to beat Georgia in the final. They're just not. They're going to get killed. I think. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I thought they'd get killed against Alabama last week. So while we're talking about the playoff, and I've talked about this a couple times in the last few days since last week's games. It's too bad there's not a 12-team playoff this year because this is wide open. If you had a 12-team, here's the teams that would be in. I went through this earlier, and the teams with buys would be Georgia, Ohio State, TCU, and Oregon as of right now, obviously. And then you'd have Michigan, Tennessee, LSU, USC, Alabama, Clemson, Ole Miss, and Tulane. Tulane has played decent football, but every team but Tulane would have a chance to win that 12-team playoff. Every team would have a chance. I can't say one team would not. I know John DeLon will say TCU. But I could say every one of those teams would have some kind of chance to win that tournament.
Well, and what about UCLA in this mix? UCLA should be rolling in there because I think with their running attack, I think UCLA can beat Tulane. I mean, come on. I mean, what Chip Kelly's done there this year, he's made progress every year he's been there. And look what the team's done. Yeah, they lost to Oregon, but I mean, Zach Charbonneau is one hell of a running back, man. And I like the way they're playing football. They're I think UCLA. You put UCLA. If this was a 12-team race, I'll tell you one thing: UCLA sitting at number 12 would pull a surprise here.
But they wouldn't be in based on the criteria.
Well, there you go again. You got to get rid of the talking heads that come up with this concoction of things being biased to certain schools. I think you got to roll this thing. I don't want to see it get like college basketball. But you got to roll it to a point where we don't have an argument here.
Hold on. Well, you're always going to have an argument. You could go to 64 and you'd have an argument about 64 and 65. I mean, look at college basketball, right? But the teams that you say there's a bias, but the teams that would be getting the buys here would be Michigan or Ohio State. I'm sorry, getting the at-large bids would be Michigan or Ohio State. It would be Tennessee. It would be LSU. Maybe I can make an argument UCLA could be in over LSU, possibly. USC, which that would play itself out because USC's got to play UCLA. Alabama and Ole Miss.
Well, here's the argument.
One of those teams to put UCLA in. You can't drop Tulane because Tulane's an automatic qualifier.
Well, here's the things. Every year these polls come out, and every year we keep seeing the Ohio States in this thing. We see the Oklahomas. We see the Texases up here. And every year, what do these schools do? Everybody knocks the Alabamas, but Alabama, if they miss it this year, it'll only be the second time they've been knocked out of this Final Four since its inception. So all these other schools are all hype trains in my book because every time we put them ahead of some of these reputable schools that are doing something, it's a far cry. Now, you say if we get 64 teams in here, somebody will argue, well, 65 should be better than 64. If you're not in the top 15 in college football, don't even come and talk to me. Don't even come and talk to me. You don't belong. But reputable, keeping it at 12, you'd have an even shot where somebody might have had 2 snake-bitten losses where now they can get in there and we can see what they're really made out of.
Yeah, and I got to agree. I got to agree with John DeLon here that if it weren't for the incompetent commissioners,
yeah, they're incompetent.
We would have a
playoff
next year, not 4 years from now.
How many times did we see Notre Dame in the top 10 every year when the polls come out in August? And where are they?
Well, that's all about, we know, like, look, they're always going to be there because the reputation and the TV ratings, we got to have them in the top 10 to start the season. And by the way, they're playing pretty good football right now. They beat Clemson pretty handily last week.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you. So again, we know you hate everything LA except USC and UCLA. Only one of those teams is going to stay alive after the next couple of weeks because they're playing each other. The loser's out. And the Pac-12 is going to have to run a table to get in. I think Oregon gets in myself. Which one of your LA schools is going to stay alive after that?
I think it's going to be USC. I think I think they can kind of sneak into this thing. They can run the table and maybe have some of these teams ahead of them drop. But I'll tell you one thing, and this is where I wish it was 8 or 12 right now, because I put my money on an Alabama or a USC to knock somebody off the perch. If we were looking at 8 or 12 right now, it'd have to be 12. My money would be on USC or Alabama right now to knock the big boys off. And my third choice would be probably Michigan.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a bold prediction right now that Ole Miss moves from number 11. They run the table. Regular season, they beat an undefeated Georgia team in the SEC championship game. They go from 11 to 4, and they make the NCAA Final Four playoff.
Wow!
Check
so
that
you
out.
think they're going to get past Alabama?
I do. This is the big step for them. They got Alabama, they got Arkansas, and they got Mississippi State left. They got no cupcakes left. Plus, they'd have to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. If that all happens, there's no way this team's not in the Final Four.
Well, what if Alabama runs the table?
Don't think they. Well, first of all, they can't get in it's unlikely they can get to the championship game. So that's what kills them. Right. If they were to get in and win, if they were to get to the SEC championship game somehow, they'll get in with 2 losses because they won the SEC championship.
Right.
They would never keep them out with 2 losses.
Right.
Now, another conference, I might not say that's the case. What are your thoughts? We got a few minutes left here. What are your thoughts? The rumors this week, we know that Jeff Scott got fired at South Florida this week, and John Gruden supposedly has publicly campaigning for that job.
I like John Gruden. I think the thing that happened in Las Vegas, to a certain extent, it was sad the way it ended, but I like, his swag. I like the way he does, his transformation of teams and builds teams into winners. I think it'd be a great move. I really do. When I look at him, when I look at a Deion Sanders, these are guys that, learn the system of playing football and learn from great players and coaches and everything. And yeah, I think it'd be, if you gave me the question of taking Cristobal, and I know you're high on him, and some of my Miami friends are high on him.
He'll right the ship there, despite that 45-3 loss last
week.
Right.
Right. But if you look at, if I had a choice of Cristobal in Miami or Gruden in Miami, I'm probably hanging my hat on Gruden in Miami.
Interesting. Actually, John DeLon's got a good point. There's a flaw in my theory. I forgot that Ole Miss lost to LSU, so they'd have to lose twice. LSU would have to lose twice for them to get in. Very good call there, John. You put a big hole in my theory there that they could possibly run a table. Alan Keith hyping up LSU. I just love Lane Kiffin. He doesn't get enough love. Everybody hates him.
Not only that, let me share a rumor that's been circulating out here in Los Angeles. A lot of people think when this transformation with UCLA and USC go over to the Big Ten, UCLA is going to back out of this thing. And rumor has it Utah would be joining USC in this. I don't like it for the simple fact I don't think UCLA and USC. I think it's too strong that UCLA or USC have to follow each other. If one of them stays home, I think the other one's going to be at a disadvantage. But the other way of looking at it is you still got control of the Pac-12 and you got control of the Big Ten.
Yeah, why would UCLA back out? What's the?
I don't know. Maybe the money would keep them there. That it's kind of hard to figure this out. But UCLA's going broke, and I don't know if that was the Under Armour deal that they made or something. But I don't think they back out either. But there's two ways you can look at it. I think they'd follow USC, but if they did back out, you'd have one team representing the Pac-12. The other team would be representing the Big Ten.
I can think about 75 million reasons they're not going to back out of that deal, by the way.
We'll find out if it's that successful where they like it. Maybe we'll find a Utah or a Washington joining them, or maybe a Utah and Oregon joining them. Phil Knight, he's not sitting around playing with patsies. He wants to throw his hat in the ring with the big boys too.
Good point. Well, this week we got some interesting matchups. We got Alabama going to Ole Miss, as we already talked about. We've got TCU going to Texas, which I think Texas will they're favored in the game or by a touchdown, I believe. I think Texas knocks TCU off that perch myself. You got Washington going to Oregon. You got K-State and Baylor. You got some good matchups this week. What game are you going to be tuned into this week?
Well, I'm going to be tuned into that Alabama Ole Miss because I think Saban doesn't, go down with 3 losses here. I think he'll figure out a way to win that one. I really enjoy watching the Bama games. The problem is that defense is giving up big yards, especially the secondary. There's a lot of pass interference calls I've been noticing. That defensive coordinator has to shore up that defense, man. Alabama's giving up some huge yards, and you can't be doing that. This is a far cry from Alabama football. And the other thing is, I think, I'm going to go against the grade here, even though, you think Texas is going to win. I think TCU wins this game to keep their streak alive. I think there's just too many problems in Texas, quarterback problems. Sarkisian's trying to right the ship.
That offense played pretty good. Ewan's played pretty good since he came back.
But the thing is, what I saw earlier in Texas and, Alabama took it to them in their backyard. I don't know. I think TCU wins this game. TCU's been strong. They've been up and coming. This team reminds me of last year. I think it was Coastal Carolina that went on a nice run, and everybody couldn't see that coming.
Coastal Carolina, yeah, they were. They've had a nice run for the last 3 years. Yeah,
right. And people thought, they can't play with the big boys, and I think this is where we look at TCU. I like this team. I think what they've done is, remarkable, and everybody's looking at the big boys. Better look in your rearview mirror. TCU's coming. Give
me your lock. Give me your. You might have already done it. Give me your lock and give me your. Don't be surprised if.
Well, don't be surprised if TCU pulls one on Texas with your prediction of that. And I think my lock is Alabama's going to get Alabama's going to win this one too.
All right. Well, I'll give you my lock will be opposite of your don't be surprised if Texas. My lock is Texas beats TCU and knocks them out of the playoff. And my don't be surprised if Central Florida goes to Tulane and puts an end to that little Cinderella story. And they put themselves in a position for that New Year's Day 6 bowl game that the group of 5.
I can't wait till Sunday, man. I got a lot to talk about. The best divisions reside in the East in the NFL. Frank Wright had it coming. And man, oh man, the Kyrie Irving saga will continue. Well, he will not play another game in Brooklyn. That's my prediction.
We'll have a great conversation about that on Sunday. Thanks for coming in tonight, Mark. We'll catch you tomorrow on in Philly.
Yeah, Liberty Bell Smack.
All right, look, tune in, guys. Liberty Bell Smack, great show. They've done a great job. They just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. Thanks for coming in tonight, Mark. Have a great night.
I love you, brother.
All right, have a good bye. All right, guys, what a great night. Went by fast tonight, maybe because I haven't been here in forever. But thanks to you guys, John, Alan, Carlos, Rick Sherlock, you disappeared on me. Don't know what you're wearing because I got on you about the Pretenders, I guess. I don't know. Congratulations to Dave Butcher-Farrell winning the Scotia mayoral race here locally. Another Perth alum. Should have said that at the top of the show. But thank all of you guys for coming in tonight. And Alan, I didn't mention you, I don't think. Watch Alan's show on Let's Talk Sports. Alan, send me some information, and we'll certainly promote that for you. And one last thing I should throw in there. Rest in peace. God bless Vince Dooley, former Georgia coach, former national champion in 1980 with Herschel Walker, who we mentioned earlier. But Vince Dooley passed away here last week when we were off. So we want to send our condolences to him and his family. So Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talks College Football Huddle. One last. Oh my God! I came up with that one more time there for you. We got that. Let me finish this up. Lock Oregon upset TCU. Let's Talk Sports Roundtable tonight, 10 o'clock. Catch Alan on that. Guys, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. It's going to be another fun weekend of college football. Keith Engel. See you later. Bye-bye.